Year 7, this is exercise 2D on transversal and parallel lines, which is on page 78 of your textbook. So, first thing I want to talk about is what are parallel and transversal lines? You may have heard of parallel lines before. We'll go ahead and discuss that first. So I'm going to go ahead and draw some parallel lines. So I'm using two sides of a ruler just so that we can show that they're parallel. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and draw these symbols here. Well, they're not really symbols, they're just arrows. So those arrows tell me that these two lines are parallel. I'm going to go ahead and write A, B, C, D so that we can actually go ahead and identify these lines. Now, in the real world, as mathematicians or people using math, we don't want to write every single word out. Okay, so writing out the line AB is parallel to the line CD, it takes too long. Instead, what I can write is AB and then CD, and use this symbol here. It's just the two lines as a symbol to show that they're parallel. Okay, last lesson we learned that this over here, that's perpendicular, which is the opposite of parallel. Perpendicular. Okay, so we've got parallel and perpendicular. These two lines are parallel. I'm going to go ahead and draw across the two lines with a third line, which is a transversal one. So I'm going to grab a ruler. Oops. I'm going to grab a ruler. I'm going to draw my line about there, and that will be my transversal. Okay, so that's my transversal line. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use my protractor, just like we did a couple lessons ago, so we can try and measure the number of degrees of each angle. So I'm going to go and measure that. This one here, that one is about, let's see, I'm going to say that's about 40 degrees. Now this is supplementary, right? So that should mean that it adds up to 180, but I'm going to measure it just in case. Yep, that's looking to be, oops. Yeah, that's looking to be about 140 degrees. So that does add up to 180 degrees. If I go ahead and measure, let's take this one over here. Let's say I try to measure this one over there. That looks to be about 140 degrees. Oops. 140 degrees. And this one over here, let's go ahead and measure that. That one is about 40 degrees. I'm going to say 40 degrees. Now, you may have noticed something. You may have noticed that these two over here, this angle there and this angle there, they're actually the same. And we can actually talk about that. Last lesson, we talked about vertically opposite. Oh, I think that was this lesson, last lesson before that. Vertically opposite angles, which means that if I have two lines, and they have the same vertex, which is the one right there, I can go across and say they have the same angle, which is correct. But we also have other angles that are the same. So let's take a look at this. A transversal crossing two lines will form special pairs of angles. These are corresponding. So corresponding looks like this. Okay, that's when I have two angles facing the same direction that have the same angle. So let's go ahead and say, well, this one over here, 140 degrees. It's an angle that looks like that. Okay. There's another angle that looks like that, and it's over here. I can actually tell you based on the corresponding, so if I use red to show, let's use red for corresponding. For red, that one right there, that would also be 140 degrees. We can actually grab a protractor and double check that to make sure we're right. That looks like a pretty good 140 degrees to me, okay? So the 140 degrees, I know that because they're corresponding. They're both facing the same way, which means they have the same angle if they're parallel. There's another type. We have our alternate. So the alternate are opposite sides and they're facing different directions. So, for example, 40 degrees over here. If I go ahead and say, well, this one's facing that way, do I have one facing the opposite? I do. Oops. I do. It's this one over here. Okay. So this one over there, this one would also be 40 degrees based on alternate angles. Okay. Now, if I go ahead and try and use my protractor to measure that out, it would give me the same result. If I go ahead and that, perfect, 40 degrees, right? 40 degrees, which means that that one is alternate. Last but not least is co-interior. I need a different color. Let's use rainbow. Okay, co-interior. Co-interior is if they're on the same side, so co meaning together, right? Oops. Co meaning together. Hopefully the rainbow is not too distracting. Together and interior over here means inside, right? So they're both inside. They're actually, it's interesting, they're not the same angle. They add up to 100, okay? So they add to 100 if they're co-interior. Sorry, not 100, my apologies. Add to 180 degrees. Add to 180 degrees. So if I go ahead, for example, this one is, they're both on the inside of this box looking shape. If I go ahead and do that, let's say this one over here, this angle there, 140 degrees, should add up with this one over here, 40 degrees, to give me 180. So I say 140 plus 40 to give me, to give me 180 degrees, and that is correct. They are co-interior, okay? So what I have talked about just then can be summed up in this this section over here. I'm not going to go over it. I'm just going to mention that this only happens if the two lines are parallel, just like in our diagram. So if, for example, your picture looks like this, then these rules won't apply. Okay, so that just sums up what I was talking about. Let's go ahead and try and do some examples. So find the value of A being our pronumeral, right? So find the value of A in these diagrams and give a reason for each answer. So over here, I know that this angle here is going to be the same as that angle there. How do I know? It's because it's an alternate, right? If I go back over here, alternate. Okay, so they're the same angle, but they're facing different directions, which means A equals to 115 degrees, and because it's an alternate angle. Okay, B, I know that this one is the same as that one, and they're facing the same direction. I should write that down. So opposite directions means it's alternate, and same direction means it's corresponding. Okay, so this one is the same direction, right? They're both facing that way. They both have the same shape like that, which means they are corresponding. So A equals 55 degrees because they are corresponding. Okay. C, I can go ahead and say that this one over here and this one over here, they're both part of the same box looking shape, which means that they are co-interior. And if they're co-interior, they don't have the same angle, they actually add up to 100. So A plus 110 should equal to 180. Sorry, I meant they add up to 180, not 100. Now, if I try to think what number do I add 110 to get 180 degrees, I actually end up with A equals to 70 degrees. And that's a final answer. Hopefully that makes a bit of sense. Let me know if you have any questions.